Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to our last episode of All Things Pilates. 7 seasons, countless stories, and connections across the globe. What a journey it's been. You know, I've had the privilege of speaking with extraordinary people from all corners of the world. People I never would have met without this show. Their knowledge and insights have helped to keep Joseph Pilates' vision alive. And I'm grateful to everyone who listened, shared, and supported the podcast, especially my longtime subscribers. Can you share with our listeners what it actually looks like?
The gyrotonic tower?
The first one that you were introduced to, and it's the main piece of equipment, correct?
Sure, yes. The gyrotonic pulley tower combination unit is a combination of 2 pieces, 2 main components. It has a bench with a rotating handle unit. It has 2 handles that can be used right hand on one, left hand on the other, or you can have both hands on one in various combinations. And the second piece to that unit is the pulley tower, which has 2 individual pulley units, and it allows the limbs to work independently of each other. So unlike Pilates, where our straps are connected directly into the back of the reformer and they're fixed. And so when we pull on those in Pilates, the unit, regardless of whether you pull with one arm, with just one side, one leg, or if you're pulling with both, the unit is going to move regardless. In gyrotonic, you have the pulley towers. So I could be working one arm or one leg and not the other. So if I have a weak limb, a weak joint, and let's say a weak hip, and one leg will be moving a little bit faster than the other, I'm going to become very aware of how to try to bring them back into synchronicity, how to bring them back so that they're moving together.
From beautiful Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, is Lolita San Miguel. Hello, Lolita.
Hello, Darien, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on All Things Pilates.
Yes, my pleasure.
Lolita, when you sustained your knee injury and your doctor suggested the Pilates method, and in particular, a student of Joseph Pilates named Carola Trier, how long did it take for you to rehab your knee?
Well, in 1958, when I was taking ballet class before performance, and I got hit accidentally behind the knee by the gentleman next to me, drew the knee out, and I was taken to Dr. Jordan. He sent me to Carola Trier. I was out for a month, and incredibly, I was back dancing, and I was back to work in a month.
That's interesting because for most of our customers, this is very far from what they know, right? I was just this week, 2 days ago, I was in Arizona at one of our Pilates on Tour conferences. It's like a roaming conference we have around the world. And that demographic at that conference is actually a rehab conference, so it really is a different group. However, we had the Contrology Reformer there for people to try. And so for some, it was completely eye-opening because they've never been on anything, Graz Tirado, Pilates Design, none of those. So it really feels quite different. It's a classical reformer is more of a heavier ride. I want to say, we say muddy or kind of gritty. It's not as smooth as some other reformers out there. You have to work a little bit harder. The springs assist you to a point, and then it's really up to you to bring the carriage all the way home. And that is a distinction on this reformer as well. So on the Contrology Reformer, the springs are deliberately a little bit long. So when you bring the carriage home, which is what we're lying on or kneeling on, you bring the springs home so they close all the way. You can also come 1 extra inch to bring that carriage a little bit further in, and at that point, the spring's not assisting you. So you can really recruit your center, your powerhouse, your core to bring the carriage a little deeper in, and it can make exercises really challenging, again, for those that want that, extra work.
Moses, what advice do you have for Pilates instructors who are coming in to our profession? They may have a fitness background, but they don't haven't had the depth of work that 10, 20, 30, 40 years that we've had. What advice do you have for them?
Well, my advice would be, first, try not to explain Pilates. It's a journey, and it's a journey of discovery. Every movement doesn't require an explanation. I have to remind myself that, every day as well, because there's oftentimes an inquiry. So my suggestion would be not to talk so much, to keep people moving. Work in a studio where there are other teachers that you can observe, and so that they can observe you teaching, and to welcome the feedback of those other teachers, not at the time of your session with your clients, but later when you have a moment. If you're in a studio and you've had teachers that you're observing, I think it's very healthy to have questions back and forth. And one final thing that I would definitely offer new teachers is know why you need to touch a client and make sure that your verbal and tactile cues are in sync. We see a lot of things that may need correction, but not all of these things require a hand to make that correction. So just be cautious in that regard.
How did you meet those two business partners?
Well, there's John Marston and Ted Johnson, and Ted is married to Erica. I met her the same time I met Justine, and my high school best friend. And so all these years, he kept thinking, aren't you a master yet? Why don't you have a product? And in the meantime, he's gone to UCLA, and he's building websites in the early 90s. So he just kept wondering, why don't I make a video, make a DVD? And I'm like, you can't put Pilates online. That's blasphemous. So it just wasn't me, essentially. So over dinner one night, we're having this conversation, and I'm saying the same old story. And he said, well, why don't we make a video podcast? I'm like, great, let's try it. We'll see. Put it on iTunes. We'll give it away. Long story short, we did that. He had a degree in film and sound and was building these websites. We did one in the same studio we're in now, and it was so elaborate, and it was good. It's actually on the website, but we couldn't do it again. He lives in LA. I live up in Santa Barbara. So that was it. A year later, he and John Marston, who had done two businesses together online, had just sold their last ones. One or two were successful, one or two weren't, and they were looking for the next thing to do, and they just called and said, are you ready yet to go try again?
Your great-grandfather was on the Isle of Man during the same time as Joseph Pilates.
I can't remember the point in time. It was probably 2 or 3 months after starting Pilates, and I was at my parents' house, and I'd said that Carol, my wife, and I were doing Pilates and explaining who Pilates was and what Pilates was. And I'd said he was interned on the Isle of Man. And my dad said, well, your great-grandfather was interned on the Isle of Man. I kind of vaguely remembered him mentioning something when I was a child, but it really meant nothing to me when I was young. And my dad seemed to think he was interned in another camp that they had on the island, which was a smaller camp. So I started to look into it and try and find out a little bit more information. And lo and behold, I was amazed to find that actually it wasn't the Douglas camp that he was interned at, it was the Knockalo camp. And then further research, there was a couple of camp newspaper articles that one mentioned Joseph Pilates and one mentioned my great-grandfather. And I put two and two together and realized it was the same sub-camp newspaper that they were mentioned in. So that actually put him in the same sub-camp as Joseph Pilates, which was kind of quite outstanding to find out, really.
Joe was interested in keeping you moving, even when you struggled with trying to figure out the spring setting, how to use the straps properly. He just wanted to keep you moving. That reminds me of Romana for sure. But at some point, you say that you fell into his rhythm, and that struck me. And I wanted to know, what was it about? Was it his rhythm verbally or his body? What did you mean by his rhythm?
Well, good question, because again, when I was doing it, I didn't think much about it. And then when I had to write about it, From the minute you walked into his gym to the minute you left, you were there to work. And you had to keep moving. You were not allowed to sit anywhere and watch anyone. You were not allowed to stand anywhere. You couldn't stop and talk. You couldn't have water for yourself. You just kept going. And you want to know how he got you to do that? There was a lot of verbal commands, in the sense that he kept telling you what to do. Sit here, move there, legs there. Very short commands, no big explanations, but he kept the pace going.
Nora Gomez-Deers is from Naples, Florida, and is distinguished by having 4 Pilates certifications, owning and operating a successful Pilates studio, and has expanded her skill set to include that of a Pilates detective.
Hi, Nora.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today on All Things Pilates. So, Nora, for our listeners who have never even heard of the jump board until maybe even today, will you explain what it is and how it's used?
So currently the jump board is a piece of accessory added to the front of the reformer. And by front, I mean where the springs are attached to the gear bar. It is most of the time designed to be made out of wood, some padding and leather, although some manufacturers do make it more of a rebounded material. So it's has a little bit more of a give. The dimensions do vary depending on the size of the apparatus, as well as the designed choreography from the training school. So some of them tend to be a little smaller, probably more about 18 inches wide by about 30 inches high. And some of them can get quite large, probably about a good 30 by 30. It just depends on the training school, and it depends on the material.
One of the most difficult and challenging things to learn in riding is your seat. And we work on our seat, which includes our posture, on a daily basis. Every ride, every horse, every day. It's an ongoing process. Just as a dancer would stand at the bar and look in the mirror and constantly check in, we do that while we're on the horses. It's also why we have the mirrors in the arena, so that we can do a visual check-in. So when I get a rider that comes to me whose posture needs some work, it's my job as their trainer and eyes on the ground to start helping them to become more aware. And one thing I've noticed is telling someone to relax or drop a shoulder or sit up straight doesn't always work, because they end up creating more tension in their body. And the next thing you know, they're sitting even more crooked or even more tense. So I always have my students move slightly or adjust something slightly with movement so that they're able to release and let go. I studied Alexander technique briefly when I was in college, and they talked about these very small movements that allowed the spine to then come into alignment. But if we try to force ourselves into alignment, then oftentimes we just end up getting tighter. And when we ride dressage, most of the time it's in a sitting position. So we need for our seats, our lower half of our body to be very deep in the saddle, very balanced, but also flexible. Because if we are blocking anywhere, that's going to directly translate to the horse's back, which then will block them. And then we start opening Pandora's box of everything that can go wrong.
Though Tracy is completely obsessed with classical Pilates, she says it has a public relations problem. Actually, 2. Problem number 1, an awareness issue. People do not understand what classical Pilates is and what makes it different from its contemporary sister. Problem number 2, an image issue. There is a perception of elitism and exclusivity. As Tracy explains, this generation of Pilates teachers and students don't care about past drama. It's a turnoff. We just want to learn the work. Tracy is zooming in from Miami, Florida, to help us figure out how to bring the classical Pilates method to current and future generations in an inclusive and inspiring way. Hello, Tracy. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Darien.
Absolutely. We have our work cut out for us, don't we?
We do. Lots to talk about, but it's an exciting topic. I love Pilates, so anytime I have an opportunity to talk about this stuff, it's a fun thing to do.
And I think the listeners are going to pick that up quite quickly. Tracy, I imagine that being a top marketing professional came at a price. How did you handle the daily stress?
Yeah, I was working in a very fast-paced environment, a lot going on, a lot of deadlines. I started at a PR agency where I was running accounts, maybe like anywhere from 7 to 10 accounts at once. Each account had, different team members to manage, lots of deadlines. And it was a lot to deal with. And I would try exercising and I just never really found anything that I loved. Nothing really stuck. I tried kickboxing and running and, just different things. And I would do it for a little bit, but then kind of lose interest. And that was until I think I found Pilates first. I did a mat class and I didn't love it. Yeah, I know. I remembered that recently. I thought my first experience was actually a reformer class, but it was a mat class. I didn't love it. But then I got an email, like one of those marketing emails, and it was an intro offer for a reformer studio. And the second that I laid down on the reformer, I was like in love, like I was hooked.
From 1975, when I was there with her, that case was resolved in 2000.
Did you have a lesson with her or did you study with her?
Oh yeah, 7 years I was at her studio. 7 years.
How was her teaching different from Joe's teaching?
Here's the big thing. This will tell you the most. When I did something original with Joe and he'd be watching me, he'd come over and say, "That's good. Just be sure you're using the whole body." And that is another thing that only Joe, I think, has that demand, that no matter what you're doing, the whole body awareness is needed to be there. Of course, I couldn't do it until I was 55 years old because I had to be in the body to do it. I could work towards it, though. And so he was very, very welcoming of our originality. And good is how he said it. And if Romana saw me do one little thing that was my own, and she was at the front of the windows by the street, I was at the back on a Cadillac, and this voice came over that's not Pilates.
I've heard that before.
She did not allow originality.
And so if it's possible to give somebody an experience of, for instance, the Pilates practice is a good example because a lot of people, when they just observe Pilates, they think that it's going to be very simple and not give them much of a workout or an experience. Yet when they actually do it, they're like, oh my, something is really happening here. And it's the same thing with Qigong, where if they can actually pause for a moment and breathe and follow along with some of these simple movements, they will have an automatic relaxation in the body. The nervous system calms down. And there's also specific things that we do so that they can sense their energy, so that we give a check both before and after a practice so that their mind can realize, oh, I have made a shift in how I'm feeling after doing these practices.
But then there are foods like, for me, for dark chocolate, it does not only lead to anti-inflammatory properties, but it actually provides some chemicals that make brain cells, neurons bind tighter together. And so that makes for more efficient work of your brain, believe it or not. Same with coffee. I mean, most people will have a direct and clear experience with caffeine providing the same. Of course, there is a point at which it becomes unhealthy.
Why did you choose to research and study brain disease?
Yeah, I was obsessed as a child because I have a condition called where I wake up in my sleep and I can't move, so sleep paralysis. And it runs in my family on my mom's side. And my mom took me to a neurologist as a child and told my mom what I had and what I suffered from in front of me. And I remember thinking, that's it? What's the management strategy here? And remember thinking, oh, I can do better than that.
Nausea was a very private person, exotic, otherworldly, and didn't tell me a whole lot about her life, but pieces of it came out throughout the month. And if I remember correctly, I started making the connection, and she told me about Joe and that she was one of his students. And then someone else later on told me she was a disciple and she was Joe's favorite student. I think that was Joan Breitbart. And Joan was the one who took me out to dinner and entertained me, and I think filled me in more on nausea than nausea actually did. When I was at Nausea's studio, it was all business.
I gave notice to any of my clients, including Buddy Bloodgood, that I was going into the Army and I wouldn't be available probably for 2 years. And then I got a call in October of 1961 from Buddy Bloodgood. I answered the phone and he said, Chuck, are you in the Army yet? And I said, no, I'm still here. I said, I don't leave for like 8 days. And he goes, good, I got an assignment for you. Some guy in New York, he said, over on 8th Avenue. He's got some kind of fitness gym. And from what I hear, he said that he's got these torture machines that stretches people and bends them and makes them stronger. And one of our writers, a freelance writers, wrote an article about it, and we need illustrations, so we need you to go there and take photos of him doing what he does.
Oh, yes.
And so I went there, one-day assignment. I went with a reporter from Sports Illustrated. And the rest is history, as you know.
And Joe Pilates took part in it, and he did 2 acts. He was doing a balancing act on chairs and ladders, and also a strength act. And he had this group of 4 men, and they did this together in this show in 1917. And I was so happy when I found this, because that was finally proof that he did something connected with the circus. Because I had been so much looking for some circus connection and I couldn't find anything. And now I know at least on Okalo, one time he was taking part in a circus.
There's documentation also, or people have written about Joe observing other internees and their lack of interest in life. You know, you have barbed wire, miles and miles all around you. You obviously aren't going anywhere. And he had maybe this altruistic side to him, and he wanted to help. And the way he could help was to get these men to find their bodies, find their core strength. How did that part of his time on the Isle of Man play out?
Yeah, I think we've been talking much about the hardship in the camp and the conditions. And I think for most of the internists, it was really so horrible to be there. And there was even a word for those people who were walking around the fence. And they said they get the Campvogel. It's like they go camp crazy, something like that. And if they started losing their wits. So
For Joe Pilates, on the other hand, I think to be in Nakalo was really
an opportunity.
It was an opportunity and a good turn of fortune, because this was the time when he was finally able to live his vocation and to start working with other people and helping them with their bodies. And I mean, nothing is more fulfilling than helping other people. And if you can improve their health, their general health, and also their mental health at this point, I think this was just wonderful for him. And this was really life-changing.
I didn't know at the time that we were doing anything but helping Heather walk and carry her son at the same time.
Right.
And a few years later, I was contacted by Mike Podlensky, was working at the U.S. Naval Hospital in San Diego. And Mike Podlensky had studied with me in a teacher training program when this was at the time when Health South was training their physical therapists in Pilates so that they could have an integrative offerings of therapeutic and conditioning work in each of the Health South facilities. So Mike had met me, and, we didn't know at the time that we would be destined for Pilates collaboration, but that's the thing is, just
you never know.
you never know. Just stay present to the moment and be grateful that it's occurring.
So many Pilates teachers around the globe who I don't know if they realize it, but just saying, just as even if it's a thank you, or I appreciate the time, or I appreciate the details, because initially I wasn't sure if I was going to be allowed to do this. I had tried to share, some of the original photos and films, and there was pushback there, and I didn't want to.
Why was there pushback?
Well, some examples were that I had put a picture of 3 of my own personal vintage Pilates books. One was Joe's Return to Life, the 2nd edition. The other was Carola Trier's Exercise, What It Is, What It Does, which she wrote for kids. And I love both of these books. And then I also included a book that Romana co-authored, which has many photos and still photos from films from the archives. So I had taken a picture of 3 of those 3 books all side by side, the book covers only, and then I wrote a caption, very harmless, I thought, saying, part of my prized Pilates collection, books by Joe, Carola, and Romana. And that actually got reported and taken down because I believe another person who co-authored the book with Romana didn't want me showing the cover. I thought it was fair use. That's what I believe that usually is okay.
So the second time I picked it up, I said, what if I do an arabesque? Oh, I wonder if I can do a penché. So working, with that and just doing the little bourrées and things like that. And not to my knowledge, but apparently Joe was watching me. And he said to me, we must film you so I can use you in my teaching. And I said, fine. And he himself, and it was 8mm. In fact, I just dug up the original packet and with the film inside of it. He sent me a copy with his, he wrote the address, maybe Clara did, but he did. Anyway, so I just winged it. I mean, it was filmed at his place, of course, after hours. It was just doing things. And I think maybe I had tried out a few little things like on the reformer, doing the split and things like that, and doing attitudes, well, you saw, and bourrées. And he said, no one has ever been able to do what you can do with this. Well, I could do it because he retrained my body.
It would be about 2002. Ron and I were in New York City. We go to Kathy's studio. Later that night, we have dinner. Kathy's sitting to my left. And I thought, God, do I ask this woman anything about Pilates, or is she going to just, knock me off my chair?
Did you feel intimidated by her?
Well, the same way you do with any of your teachers. You respect them, you love them, but you want to please them. And also, it was dinner. It was really kind of inappropriate. So I was taking a risk. If she had told me to shut up, I'm eating dinner, it would have been okay. So I said, Kathy, could I ask you a question about the chair? I was at your workshop. She said, okay. And I said, did I hear you right? It's in my notes that the goal is to use the least amount of springs possible. And I kept it to the step-up exercise, the least amount of springs. And she said, well, yes. And I said, and I heard you say that you should not press your weight into the top leg, but work on pulling the bottom leg straight up. So you didn't go at a lunge. This is what she said. Well, how else would you do it?
She said it like that.
He said it like that.
Either the first or second post that I made led Gallagher to make a comment on one of my posts. And it was something to the effect of, nice to see people posting images that Elaine Ewing paid to scan. So I didn't really understand what this comment meant. I didn't reply to it. And I knew a little bit about his reputation, so I just blocked him from my account. And that is when the stuff hit the proverbial fan. That's when he went through my Instagram account, went back to its inception. He reported me for 19 separate violations. So that was like sort of the big first wave. And all of those images were ones that I had posted over the course of the previous 4 years. So then, less than a week later, Gallagher's partner, Miss Ewing, came out with a supposedly impromptu Instagram Live. She talked about her discovering these images, and she went on to flood her Instagram with photos from the collection. So let me just backtrack for a second. The Elaine Malvin photos were taken in 1956 by a photographer for Look magazine. His name is John Vachon, and they were unpublished. They were in the Library of Congress archives, and the rights to them are clearly spelled out on the Library of Congress website. So the timing of Gallagher reporting me for 19 supposed copyright violations and Ewing announcing her discovery just didn't feel coincidental to me then. It doesn't feel coincidental to me now.
I like it. Okay, with all...
Right, and then there's freedom, right?
Okay, so all of this yummy explanation and embodiment understanding, how the hell do you pay your bills?
Right. I mean, there is that there was a season of where I was really in the arts world. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to be married, but we were still young and we were still trying to make it in LA. And, the universe has a way of opening doors when you want where you need to go. So unfortunately, I went to grad school at University of California, Irvine. I had another injury, a knee injury, and that pulled me out for a while of school. And so I was doing a lot more research, video choreography, and I had to take a step back in that moment. It's like, you're almost 30.
Oh my God.
Are you going to be able to do this? Right? I know it's young, but it's not, right? Are you going to be able to do this? What is your big vision? Because when you grow up dancing and you have this life and you're on stage and performing, and it's exhilarating to be in the studio every day. But what does it look like to expand on that? And I felt the call, right, to be a Pilates teacher who danced instead of a dancer who taught Pilates on site.
That's a difference.
My choreography was always very intentional based, like very intention. Every time I take a step in a new direction, it's with intention. And it's someone, the universe, God, leading me there. So once I fully decided to commit to that, doors open. So I was able to do some management work for Spectrum, now Bay Clubs in Los Angeles, for their Redondo Beach location and their El Segundo location, and manage a group of studios, teachers, and that was a really wonderful experience.
So it was really a process. It's really a process. So I start off with trying to understand what I want, so to what is the amount of work I want to present. And it always then for me starts with, what do I know about what has Joe done? So watching all the videos, watching all the archival stuff, pictures, everything I can get my hands on and try to decipher. Then going back to the Romana syllabus and saying, okay, when I have talked to Brett, what did he tell me about these exercises? What did Moses tell me about this exercise? So trying to understand which exercises are there, which you can, I would say, assume that Ron, Eve, Carola, for example, then also had in their repertoire, which is then fantastic, though, for example, because Carola also then documented stuff, and you can then cross-reference and check, okay, I see this exercise on her photo, I see it on Joe's, they look very similar, they have the almost same name or not the same name, and you start to understand what should be in there.
100%. I think that some of the problems with so many industries, but definitely with ours, is this sort of inherent sense of competition between teachers. Because again, if we're all going after the same, 15% of the population, we have no choice but to sort of compete. But again, if we're operating from a place of abundance, then we are definitely, we share with other teachers. And God, every single time I learn something new from Ray, or even one of our apprentices who goes, oh, I came up with a great idea. It's just, I am reinvigorated to, learn more, try it, do this. And no Pilates studio is an island, or at least it shouldn't be. But here we are.
I think that if you approach the work from a place of curiosity,
absolutely,
you're always going to have passion.
Mm-hmm.
If you accept, because I think in order for you to, for some reason in this industry, we have to have no flaws. We have to be perfect because you're performing, you're on stage, you're being looked at from every angle. Don't do this. The master teacher in the room looked this way. That means this. They pursed their lips like this. We add all this stress to a situation for a type of movement that's supposed to make us calm and content, and we don't actually, as teachers, live our lives that way. We are in a constant fight to be the best, because if you're the best, you're guaranteeing that you're going to make money, and we need to stop getting there by stepping on each other.
I'm curious, Anna and Z, who you lovingly speak about and use various body parts. How did they come into your life?
Z, again, these are their names as donors as opposed to as persons. Z was a friend of our lab director, and he passed away and donated himself to my project specifically. So he picked me. And Anna similarly was donated to our lab and looked to me like the perfect physical foil for Z, because he was kind of, thin and she was more fleshy. And so they made for a good comparison pair, which was my goal for the Anatomy from A to Z project, was to be able to do a comparative anatomy of two bodies, just to bring home the point over and over and over and over and over again that we are very individually expressed.
Were these the first two bodies that you were working with? This is the most intimate?
Oh, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of bodies. And I filmed, the Integral Anatomy series back in the mid-2000s.
Anything else that Lawrence shared with you? For example, did he have any kind of special relationship with Clara?
He did. He said that Clara was primarily the teacher. So she did so much, and where Joe was so rough around the edges, she was the let's say she was the smoother, and she definitely smoothed out anything that he kind of created with a lot of the clients. There was tension, and she definitely stepped in.
Was she as hands-on as Joe?
Hands-on, yes, but not in the aggressive way, I want to say.
Okay.
He said that her touch was caring, and it would, what's the word that he used? Well, he said that when she put her hands on you, you knew it. And it was to coax you to go further, but not force, if that makes sense.
Yes, because there's footage where you see Joe pushing that one guy, pushing his head down.
Say, right. And I asked him about that. He said that a lot of that was, yes, he did do that. But a lot of that, when that camera or when there was, he was a salesman. And when that was there, that came on. And he was selling something, right? And it was his method.
So that is the insight that we've brought to the design. So when I say it's classical, it's the idea that anyone who is familiar with what the classical equipment is, they shouldn't have to relearn their movement.
Oh.
So that was the design restraints, the parameters that I placed on it. Now, the example of, what's different, the foot bar and the kickstand, the foot bar lock. It's treacherous on any classical piece of equipment because you can pull the foot bar back and you fall backwards because nothing locks it in place. In fact, I tell all my new clients, it's commonly called a foot bar, but it's a misnomer because sometimes your feet are on it, sometimes your hands are on it. What it is a push bar. It should only be pushed. You should never pull on it because if you pull on it, there's no lock. Your ass overhead on the back end of the carriage, and you're falling into the well behind you because it's not made to pull. It's only made to push. Now, if you look back at the older design for even Grotzmade, there is no, not even a lip. There's no lip. Lip on the edge. It's just a flat shelf.
Yeah, scary.
Okay. So it's foolish. So what I went about doing is, 15 iterations. I went about creating a kickstand lock that doesn't need any other muscle memory.
Yeah, you get on the trains, you don't know what's going on, but you still do it because you're
absolutely. You just have that drive. You just have okay, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to do. Nothing is going to stop me for doing it. And but you have to have certain ingredients. You actually have to have that drive, but you have to be able to have the whole package. Your technique has to be good. Your body has to be good for whatever you're searching. You have to be realistic in those. My unrealistic thing is I wasn't black. It's or black enough because I'm not black, but I'm brown. It's does that count? And apparently it didn't matter at that point, not for the women where a lot of them were as pale as me. There's so many shades of black. I didn't know that at the time. But for men, you had to be dark, but not for women.
At some point, did you say to yourself, I believe I am fully recovered? Did you say those words to yourself? And if so, how did that make you feel? What was going on in your head?
Yes, it was very epiphany-like, to use that word as an example. I literally woke up exactly like you describe it. It was like an afterthought. I woke up it dawned on me. And, now that I'm thinking about it, it makes perfect sense because you have some of your best thoughts in the morning, right when you wake up. Your head is clear and you're not bogged down by all of the daily things that are yet to come. So you've got a free open space in your mind. That's when you get your best thoughts. And that allowed that epiphany to really shine. Hey, my back is feeling pretty good. I've noticed that I've been getting better. Yes, it happened in the morning after I got up.
So now that we have a manufacturing leader, we're able to start to address all of that, which is so much more rewarding for them. I mean, they get endorphins and a little spring in their step when they go home and they know they've built more than half-built items sitting on the floor. So it's been a real treat to work with them and see them be able to accomplish more. And you can tell they love that.
Of course, one of the first things Elizabeth did with her background was the company didn't pay benefits for what we do now. August 1, we started that. And so those kinds of things give people the opportunity to build a career. And some of the skills that are required here are not ordinary skill. It may seem trivial to look at a ladder barrel and look at how the fabric tucks into the wood on the side. That is really hard to do. A spine corrector is really hard to do. Every staple has to line up. The corners can't have frayed edges. It's got to be exactly right. The work on welding is extraordinarily difficult. And so it's hard to find people that can do those things as well as we'd like them to. And we want them to stay forever when we find them. And so things like benefits will help. Mm-hmm. But these are like long-term investments, for the payout for this community of your listeners, really, over the next years and decades.
And the only thing that makes sense to me on a gut instinctive level is that because osteopenia is minimized, and I think often people will come into me and go,
"Oh, that's not a big deal.
I just have osteopenia." Right. And the doctors have said, "Oh, you have osteopenia, no big deal," because many of us do. There's no behavior modification instruction that goes with that. Basically, what I was told when I went in to have my DEXA scan, and I don't know if this was your experience too, Darien, that if I showed osteopenia, they would wait and see how it was in 2 years. It's like, wait and see. Really? Nothing else? Like, if you know you have bone density loss, isn't there something you can do at that point?
Yeah, and it wasn't until her husband was very well known.
Where did she meet him? Did she meet him in New York?
No, they were both from the Imperial Valley. They knew each other early on. So what's interesting is the brother that she went and lived with, both in San Francisco and then in New York, married Helen Gentry, and Bruce Gentry was Helen's brother. So when Helen and David got together, the family came over to meet Eve's family, and it started there. So it was before anybody left their initial home ground. It was funny because she said, "We didn't get married for the longest time, but everybody thought we had." And they finally did. And she finally took his name in 44 or something like that. She changed her name.
Yeah, but when you're a single woman, like I said, I'm afraid for my physical safety because he has shown such an evil side.
Well, you can use that to your advantage. You know that.
Oh, maybe I don't know that.
Okay, well, that's something we can discuss.
But anyway, he does not deserve to be in that space. He is not gracious for what has been given to him. He is not humble. He is a...
Okay, so you're not giving his name.
So I will tell you that the name of his studio is called Nice and Tall, but that he is not nice and he's short.
Okay.
Thank you, Darien, because I was very afraid to do this podcast and to call out this person.
Well, there's a huge injustice that's been done And I'm sure people listening will agree with you and feel that something needs to be done to right this injustice. And maybe it's karma. Maybe I can't imagine that Joe's too happy with what's the apparatus line?
Oh, it's just like all this contemporary stuff because, he's banking on group classes and also charging an exorbitant amount of money for the expertise and knowledge that he does not have.
And he came up to me after the class and he made eye contact with me. I was so shy. And he asked me my name and I said it was Jill. And he looked at me and he said, well, you have to act like you have, and he spelled it out on his chest, Jill, across your chest in diamonds. God. And I was just stunned.
Oh my goodness.
And I was advised by the ballet teacher who had also taken me under his wing at the ballet camp for 2 years in a row that I wasn't getting anywhere at my little local school. And it was time, if I wanted a career, to pursue something else.
And I had this nurse/physical therapist that was my angel that came to me and she started moving my legs, She was the one that did all these exercises for me. She would whisper, the first thing she would whisper in my ear is, if you can hear me, know that you have the power to heal yourself. If you can hear me, know that what's impossible for men is possible for God. If you can hear me, start visualizing your body as a uniform usage where you have the power to move, to heal your organs. And I started taking that and said, I can heal. God, you're going to heal me. I can do this. And everything she told me, I would hear. And she said, I'm going to give you a little bit of movement, which is called Pilates. And I don't know if she was really doing Pilates, but she said that. And I didn't really think about it in the moment, but she always said, now point and flex. This is Pilates. But I'm going to point your toes. She would move my feet, and then bring my legs in and out. And she would say the names of exercise, which today I could say single leg stretch, double leg stretch. And she would talk to me about faith, exercise, God, and Pilates. And that moment, I remember just thinking, I have to heal. I have to get out of this. I'm going to make it. And when I do wake up, which was a miracle, the doctors said it's a miracle. And the most important part of this, Darien, is when I wake up, I have no lupus, no cancer until this.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Everything was healed. Everything was healed. I couldn't feel my legs. That was the only problem. The doctors would cry because they said, the exams are clean. You're clean. And I think it was my miracle. This is very hard because I know a lot of people that I've told my testimony say, okay, so why did you get healed and others don't? And it's true. That's a hard thing. But I believe every person has their own journey. And I believe today that when you, let's say, die, you go to a beautiful place.
I'd like to thank my podcast host, Buzzsprout, that made it possible for All Things Pilates to be listened to in over 137 countries and territories. But don't worry, all seasons are still available wherever you listen to your podcasts. So, my loyal listeners, it feels like the right time to step back and make space for other parts of life. A huge thank you to my sound engineer, Fabian Romero, whose talent, care, and patience made every episode shine. Thank you, everyone, so much for your support, your messages, and, of course, your ears.